Welcome to the Church Solutions Podcast, brought to you by JSL Solutions. The Church Solutions Podcast is designed to help equip you and your church in the use of technology and other tools and services. And now, here are your hosts, Steve Lacey and Phil Thompson.
And hello, and welcome to another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast.
Hi, my name is Steve Lacey.
And I'm Phil Thompson. Thanks so much for being with us today. We're excited to be with you as we are every week as we do this podcast. We're a company called JSL Solutions. And very quickly, Steve, what is JSL Solutions in case you might be new?
We serve the church ministry. We serve churches and their ministries with tech products.
All right.
So live streaming, mobile apps, church management, and all kinds of great stuff.
And a podcast here, we've been doing this now for several years. We like doing a podcast because we have a real heart for churches, and we have a heart for ministry, and we've been in it ourselves for a long time and been involved in leadership and myself, pastoral ministry. So we have a heart for churches and pastors and volunteers, and so we'll talk many times about lots of different subjects, not just tech stuff, but volunteer stuff.
So what are we talking about today?
Well, today we are going to talk about tech things. We're going to talk about cameras, and specifically PTZ cameras, and we have a guest today. Andres Caamano is our guest, and Andres is actually the site editor for a well-known publication. Worship Tech Director is actually the website, worshiptechdirector.com. And it's a website that's set up to really help tech directors, audio people, video people, lighting, creative people, music directors, worship leaders, all that good stuff. And what they do is they bring about, they shed some light on the latest technology out there. And so it's good to have Andres with us today. Andres, how are you?
Doing very well, thank you.
Well, it's good to have you here. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time. And you're coming to us from the East Coast. Is that correct?
Correct. Framingham, Massachusetts.
All right. What's the weather like there?
It's been kind of dreary, and you would think it's April more than late May.
Well, nobody cares, but here in Tucson, Arizona, it's sunny and hot, like 100 degrees. So anyhow, well, Andres, we really do appreciate you talking to me and Steve and PTZ cameras. This is a subject I've actually been interested in a long time, and so it's good to have you here to give us a little bit of insight on this. I don't know if anybody out there, I'm sure people have heard the term PTZ cameras, but they remind me of something out of Star Wars. Some of them look like something that's out of Star Wars, like kind of a round helmet-shaped thing, and they're small.
Did we say what PTZ stood for?
What is? Well, let's ask the expert. What does PTZ stand for, Andres?
Pan, tilt, and then zoom.
There you go. Pan, tilt, and zoom. Everything you ever wanted in a camera. So let's just jump into it here. PTZ cameras, they're smaller, and they are cameras that are actually set up to be like automated, right? You can mount them different places within your sanctuary or your worship center.
Absolutely. Yes.
Tell us a little bit about this. Why would my church even consider using some of these?
Well, with just some expanded demand each and every year for streaming capabilities by churches, not just large churches, but also medium and small size churches, and just the quality of what they're streaming for worship services are becoming. It's no longer just set up one camera and have one feed. You are typically looking at multiple angles just to keep the people who are watching at home on a stream, whether they are ill and unable to make it to church, or if they're watching from a far distance away. To have that ability to watch a service in a way where they feel as though they are there. And obviously, if you're just setting up a single camera, that's not going to do that. The interest level is going to wane within a short period of time if it's just that single feed, that single angle. And so, as we all know, churches, small, medium, and large, the challenge of volunteers keeping the size of a staff to be able to man enough cameras to do that is very challenging. And so with the technology of PTZ cameras having improved in recent years, you have churches of all sizes, looking at PTZ cameras.
Well, we know that I think everybody listening that's involved in volunteer ministry or leadership in their church certainly understands the issues of having enough volunteers to take care of things Sunday morning, or even staff for that matter. But when I think of PTZ cameras, the first thought that came to my mind was those old security monitors and those old security cameras, like banks have, and you see the video and it's black and white and it's fuzzy and it's just, it's not very good. But that's not the case today, is it, for PTZs?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the advancements of what these cameras are capable of doing. For instance, when I went to the NAB conference in Las Vegas just a few weeks ago, Ross Video rolled out a new PTZ camera called the Pivot Cam, and it's 1080p quality, and the zoom quality of what it's able to do. So I think it was 30 times zoom. You is able to do, and as you said, it's the biases of old, of thinking of kind of the bank camera where you look at that fuzzy picture and you say, I can't tell who the robber is. That's old technology that's long since passed. And beyond the Ross video camera, I know worshiptechdirector.com did a recent profile on a series of different PTZ cameras back in April. 7 different cameras, PTZ cameras, and in particular, I thought of the 7, the one that really stood out was the JVC model, the KYPZ100. What really I thought stood out about that, it also had a 30 times optical zoom, had a resolution of 1920 by 1080, so 1080p as well, and just amazing flexibility with regard to its pan and its tilt angle. So, a lot of times people worry about, well, I set up this camera, will I be able to get every angle that I'm going to need? Well, just this specific JVC PTZ camera is able to go for a pan angle of plus and minus 175 degrees, pretty much covers most of your viewing angle that you're going to need.
So one of the things I don't think we talked about as we introduced these PTZs, and I think we've all assumed what's going on. Maybe not everyone listening has caught on, but these PTZs, the main benefit is their remote control, right?
Absolutely.
So when we talk about requiring less volunteers, that means that you can have one guy at a little remote control panel, and he can drive several different cameras at one time, right?
Exactly. I mean, for instance, going back to the Ross model that I referenced, using a controller with a joystick and being able to handle whether you connect 3 or 4 or 5 of those cameras using that joystick, individually controlling each of the video feeds through each of those cameras, all through one control.
That's pretty amazing. And I don't know. I've heard of churches using like 3 of them. I mean, do you know anybody out there that's using more than 3 of these PTZ cameras? One person, again, as Steve said, one person kind of running all this. I mean, what's the max that you know of?
Well, I mean, I know, for instance, there was a church in North Carolina that had recently installed, I think it was 4 of those JVC cameras as part of a recent AVL install. And again, just having that flexibility of being able to show different angles. Yeah. It's all, through one controller, and as I said, done through one staff member or one volunteer.
Yeah. Right. Actually, our church that I attend switched over to PTZ cameras. It's probably been a few months now, but we made the switch a while back, and we'll get into maybe some more questions related to that, because we went with a different route with the PTZs, and but it was kind of the same thing. We went from basically having a manned camera and a fixed camera to now we have 3 cameras that I guess they're all manned, and there's pros and cons with this, and we experienced some of that as we made this transition over. What are some of the pros and cons that you feel with PTZ are?
Well, I find, again, going back to just the improvements over the years, one of the things that had been a problem a few years back was kind of the smooth transitions and the speed to which going from point A to point B with a PTZ camera, and what has been able to be done in the last few years with that smooth transition, it's to the point where people aren't necessarily saying, "Oh, that's a PTZ camera going from moving from one spot to the next." So I find that there's been significant improvement in that area. Now, obviously, the level of control that one has specific to holding that camera and directing it the way you want versus doing manually controlling 4 or 5 cameras, for instance, from one control. Obviously, there's going to be that potential for loss of control specific that you might want, particularly if you're focused on, say, the worship pastor as they're walking across the stage, but at the same time, paying close attention to the worship band that is also on a portion of the stage, and just being able to kind of focus that attention all with one person. That's a lot on that one person's plate, versus having individuals who are running one camera with one area that they're focusing on. There's a remote control component, a control panel for these, and then there's the cameras. Are they typically sold in kits, or are there different vendors and suppliers for the control end versus the PTZ end? How's that work? Well, I mean, as I had mentioned, for instance, like with the Ross Video Pivot Cam, they have their video switchers that work in conjunction with the PTZ cameras, so you can have that combination. And then the JVC model as well, they also sell a controller that works in conjunction with their PTZ camera.
Can you mix and match, or can I buy a
absolutely?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, basically the different types of controls that basically you just need to make sure that there are different control protocols, and you have to obviously make sure that the camera that needs that specific protocol matches with the controller that you're going to pair it with. So, for instance, the JVC model that I've referenced, there are 3 different protocols: the RS422, RS485, and Pelco D. So that would work with any controller that runs any one of those 3 protocols.
Okay,
that's fascinating. So I have a question about the lighting. I mean, with typically with your real expensive cameras, professional grade cameras that people use for video, you have, if you can get away a little bit. I mean, lighting's always important, but you can cheat a little bit with some of the nicer cameras, and they can deal with lighting issues and fluctuations. But what about these PTZs? I mean, how much does lighting, do they have to have like special lighting, or can they work well in maybe low level lighting depending on the environment? I mean, I think
that they have improved dramatically in that area. When I had the opportunity to see the Ross Pivot Cam and what it was able to do in low lighting situations, I could definitely see where when they were talking about the different markets that it was ideally suited for, and mentioning that House of Worship was one of them, it made all the sense in the world. Because to me, if you are selling a PTZ camera and it does poorly in low light situations, then really it isn't suited at all for the House of Worship market, because we all know there are going to be significant portions of a service where a camera is dealing with exactly that issue, low light.
Right. So, and with regard to kind of configurations of these things, we're mainly talking about PTZ cameras that they're cameras that pan, tilt, zoom, and they have the remote control. Are there platforms for other? Say you already have your camera and you want to turn it into a PTZ. I assume there's platforms out there that you can mount your existing camera to a PTZ platform.
Yeah, absolutely. There are those setups as well. For those who, as you said, they already have the cameras and they don't want to, move on to another camera. They've already made that investment. So there are those configurations that are available as well. To me, I find as though while those do exist, those seem to be kind of going away just because the convenience factor, the weight factor, all those sort of with the smaller units. We're talking the smaller units being 3 to 4 to 5 pounds, and just the convenience factor of working with volunteers, specifically within churches, that I find that those sort of cameras, really seem to be the way that PTZ cameras are going. Whether it's the two models I mentioned or another one that stands out is the Lumens VC G30. That's a high definition PTZ video camera as well. And the other thing as well, why I think making a move towards those smaller cameras is making such sense for churches is they realize that even when they invest in a video camera, the technology oftentimes, they're looking at a 3 to 5 year investment in that camera before they're looking to again upgrade. And for many of these cameras, to make a move to one of these smaller PTZ cameras isn't that significant of an investment. There are models available out there less than $1,000 a model to $2,000 to $3,000 a model. So if you're looking to add 3 or 4 or 5 cameras, obviously that's a significant investment, but it's one that I think, particularly for medium or large size churches, is an investment that's well worth it. And even for small size churches, I think that they'll understanding the demands for streaming for their services, that they are going in that direction as well.
So one of the, I think, obvious advantages, or we experienced at our church as well, is we could stick the camera wherever we wanted to before. Before we had a manned camera, we had to figure out, okay, how's this guy going to drive this camera around? But now we can stick these cameras on, far walls, real up high, or wherever we need to do it. So it leads to my next question, but regarding installation, I'm obviously going to need some power where I'm going to be mounting the camera. Do I need to run a network back to my controller, or are there wireless controllers, or what's the installation? What should I expect for that?
For most of the models, there are so many different variables available that it pretty much allows for full flexibility for any sort of install that you're really looking for. To where oftentimes just a single power wire is all that's needed to to get the signal to that PTZ camera as well as the power.
Oh, okay.
So what you're saying is you don't necessarily have to run a bunch of cables all over the place?
Exactly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, there are setups, for some of the different models, right, that allow for very basic setups. I remember seeing last year with one of the Lumens models, it was just a single cable that basically combined the power as well as the signal right to the camera.
Fascinating.
Right. Are there wireless from the platform to the controller? Does anyone make a wireless setup that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of any, but that's just sorry.
Yeah, I'm just curious, and
it's probably will be eventually sometime, I would think. That's interesting. So we're talking with Andres Caamano here, who's the editor of Worship Tech Director, which is, you can just go to worshiptechdirector.com. He's got a wealth of different articles and stuff, and you're just a good resource here. So PTZ Cameras, sounds like there's a lot of pros here, especially now that we're in the year 2017. They're better. They're high definition. Lighting works well. They seem to actually pan and zoom pretty well. As you know, from the old days, it used to be kind of awkward, but it seems like they're smoothing those things out. So it sounds like there's just a lot of benefits going this direction.
What are the cons? Are there cons?
I think there are obviously, we kind of covered some of the cons, obviously for the fact that putting the demands of running 4 or 5 of these cameras on one individual, there's a point to where there's a kind of a breaking point, and even if it's not necessarily a breaking point, just what the capabilities of what that one individual can do, running all those cameras all at once.
Right.
Obviously, there are going to be certain finite differences of what that one individual by themselves can do while running those multiple cameras, versus if you had 4 or 5 individuals running those individual cameras manually, just what they can keep an eye out for, how they can handle the different feeds, and just again, it's just a matter of more eyes on what is going on and being able to handle that streaming the capability to a higher level.
Right. So I mentioned, our church went from a manned and a fixed camera to some PTZs, and it's probably just our setup. But one of the challenges we have, and we may not have the best controller, is we're not able to follow the pastor with the PTZ as well as we could with, a manned camera. And our setup is, we don't have joysticks, but we have I don't know what they call them, 4-panel, left, right, up and down.
Toggles,
toggles, like a game controller deal, but not a toggle switch that you could. So, and it's single speed as well, which is makes it kind of tough. So, do we need to upgrade, or what's the answer?
Well,
for that?
What I have seen for some setups is that there is technology available where the pastor in this instance would hold on to a piece of equipment in his hand, and the lights and the camera would follow him in such a way where it's some of the challenge that you're talking about. Obviously, it's the combination of not just the camera but also the lighting. But this technology that's available would allows for that pastor to walk across the stage, and for the lighting and for the camera to follow him across in a smooth fashion. And just going back to with regard to the network capabilities, there is the capability for some cameras to have IP network capability. So in that case, it would be a wireless situation.
Okay, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I thought that was part of the deal there. So really, Steve, your answer is to get a gamer to run cameras for you. Somebody like my son. Somebody that runs,
I guess, because that is a challenge for us. We now have 3 cameras, so it's nice so we can set up. Right. If the pastor walks out of a shot, we could switch to another camera that's covering that shot. But before we were able to, if he walked really slow, we could, you could really slowly follow him and keep him centered. And we just found it's a little more challenging with our PTZs. One of the cons we've run into is you can't. It's at least with the controller we have, it doesn't look as natural.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk price here, because I know there's some pastors listening to this Church Solutions podcast and they're saying, boy, this all sounds great, but what about my budget? So, there's obviously, as you said earlier, there's different price ranges. Give me an idea here on prices if somebody wanted to do this go with PTZ cameras, maybe they go with 3 of them maybe.
Okay.
What would it cost them, just off the top of your head?
Well, I mean, I mentioned, for instance, the Lumens VC G30 camera, which is a high definition PTZ camera. And that one right now runs around $1,800 per camera. Okay. So if you're talking a series of 3, then you'd be looking at about just under $5,500 for those 3.
Does that include the controller? So you'd only need or 3 controllers, right? But just
that would be that would be just for the camera itself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Or in this case, the 3 cameras. And then obviously there are different tiers above that. There were 3 different models that we featured as part of a slideshow that were kind of in that lower range, beginning at just under $900. One put out by Huddle Cam HD. It's the 10X GY G3 PTZ. And that one was just, as I said, just under $900. And then kind of going up from there, PTZ Optics has a model called the PT12X, and that one was just under $1,700. And then the Lumens one that I mentioned, and those kind of that trio altogether kind of runs within that lower tier that we featured on the site in our April slideshow. And that Huddle Cam, for instance, Huddle HD Cam, that model, for instance, runs in 1080p, also 720p, and has a 12 times digital zoom and a 10 times optical zoom. So that's pretty impressive for a model starting at just a price point of less than $900.
Right. And I would assume that if I'm buying multiple cameras, you'd want to buy the same camera. So
absolutely. With all the different variables of just their feature sets, the last thing you really would want to be doing is mixing and matching PTZ cameras, especially when you're talking about zooming capability. I can only imagine a situation where you have one camera on the right side within your worship space, and then one on the left, one brand with a 10 times zoom and another one with a 20 times zoom, and wondering, why can't I get the same sort of shot on this camera? Well, it's only because you only have a 10 times zoom, so you're limiting yourself in comparison to the one on the other side. Yeah. So absolutely, you want to when you do, if you want to go the route of multiple PTZ cameras in your worship space. Absolutely, to get not just the same manufacturer, but also the same model across the board for each and every one of those PTZ cameras.
Our challenges were we had a mixture of cameras. This is before we went to PTZs, and
I remember that. And
there's just color balance and just other issues. You switch from one to the other, like, oh my gosh, what happened to that great picture I had over here? Now he had a green shirt on, and now he's got a blue shirt on. What happened?
Now he's yellow.
Yeah, absolutely. Color balance, as you mentioned, that's just one of many. The frame rates, all sorts of different challenges that you can would have to contend with if you were mixing different models across the spectrum.
Awesome. Well, look, we're out of time here. But you are a fantastic resource, and we'd love to have you on again if you are willing to put up with our shenanigans here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good deal. So Andres Caamano is our guest, and has been our guest here. And again, the website is worshiptechdirector.com. That's at least that's the one I always spy on. Are there a couple other ones you want to throw out there, Andres?
Well, in addition, there's worshipfacilities.com, and if for those tech leaders out there that are looking to potentially add some training in the future, you should always check out wfxweb.com for future conferences.
All right, good deal. Awesome. Well, we are so pleased that you spent some time with us today, Andres. I thank you so much. It's been a real privilege and an honor for us to have you on, and we certainly would love to have you on again in the near future.
Appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Right. Well, the guy across the table from me is Steve Lacey. I'm Phil Thompson. And if you want to give us some feedback, you can certainly do so by sending us an email if you want. Support@StreamingChurch.tv. That's one of our website, StreamingChurch.tv, and you can send us an email there. We'd love to get your feedback. Maybe you're using some of these cameras we're talking about here, PTZ cameras, and you've got some 2 cents to add. We would love to hear what you think about it, or maybe you've got questions. Shoot us an email, and we'll try to find the answer for you. And we are out of time. So have yourself a great day. Thanks for joining us, and catch us next time on another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast. Take care.